Week 7 of the fantasy football season is here, and whether you are 5-1 or 1-5, we're here to help you dominate your fantasy football leagues. And so, of course, for this, we have to bring in Sports Illustrated's senior fantasy analyst, Michael Fabiano. Fabs, I want you to help us out today with some of those tough start-sit decisions. It's Week 7, tons of star players on bye. We need you to help us. Can we talk a little bit about the quarterback position?
Yeah, let's do that. And I'm starting Aaron Rodgers. You know, Rodgers hasn't been great this year, right? 3 of his first 6 games, he has failed to score 20 points, but you got to play him against the Washington football team. They've allowed 5 different quarterbacks to score 22-plus fantasy points, including 4 who have scored at least 25. So this is a very good option for fantasy managers. Start Aaron Rodgers. He will own the Washington football team, much like the Chicago Bears last week. And then Daniel Jones is a sit-em for me. You know, he had a really good start to the season, but the offense has fallen apart. The offensive line is a mess right now. He's got several injuries to the wide receiver position. Now, Carolina's defense has given up to Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, all had big games. DJ's not on that level right now.
You know, the running back position has been particularly beat up this year. What can we look to do for Sunday's games?
Start Darrell Henderson. As long as he's healthy, he's got to be in your lineup. He put up nearly 25 fantasy points last week. He's been the bell cow for the Rams in that explosive offense. Really good matchup this week against the Lions. They've allowed a total of 12 touchdowns and the second most fantasy points per game. The running backs, on the sit-em side of it, now this is for DFS. You have to play Elijah Mitchell. I get it. There's 6 teams on a bye, but temper your expectations, all right? Because the matchup's not great. The Colts have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs, and only Derrick Henry and the aforementioned Henderson have scored more than 13 fantasy points against them in a game this season.
The wide receiver position feels like it's especially tricky this week because we're missing receivers from the Cowboys, from the Bills, from the Chargers, from the Vikings. It could be tricky. So who are you recommending that we start this week and who should we sit?
This one's obvious with DJ Moore, but he's actually been bad the last couple of weeks. I mean, 9.9 points per game. That is not what we expect. He will rebound against the Giants. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, and their defense is tied for the 5th most touchdowns allowed to receivers lined out wide. So DJ Moore will bounce back this week. Keep the faith and start him. But I am fading Henry Ruggs where I can. He had a big game last week, 97 yards and a touchdown against the Broncos, but he's had just 4 targets per game this season. And you also look at the matchup, the Eagles have allowed just 2 touchdowns and the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing receivers, so Ruggs could struggle.
And finally, at that ever-frustrating tight end position, what are we doing this weekend?
Start Dallas Goedert. Now, as we record this, he is currently on the COVID-19 reserve list. We expect him to be back for Sunday. If he is, great matchup against the Raiders. They've allowed 4 touchdowns and the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends. And no more Zach Ertz taking away those snaps and targets. So Goddard's a great play. But I'm sitting Evan Engram. I mean, the Giants have had all kinds of injuries at the wide receiver position. He still has not been able to produce at a high level. And the matchup's not great against the Panthers. They've allowed just 1 tight end to finish with more than 10.1 fantasy points against them this season. So if you have the luxury, sit Evan Engram.
Excellent advice, as always, from Michael Fabiano. And guys, if you want all of Fabiano's start-sit recommendations, go over to si.com/fantasy and you'll find them all there for quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, running back, defense, and even kicker. But even more importantly, be sure you click that subscribe button right here and you will get our waiver wire videos and start-sit videos every single week at si.com.